I'd like to move the House to now adjourn.
The question is that this House to now adjourn. Kim Johnson.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This month marks the 40th anniversary of the publication of the groundbreaking Swann Report, Education for All, the first of its kind. The report was commissioned to examine disparities in educational attainment and experiences among ethnic minority pupils and made recommendations to tackle institutional racism in the education system. The inquiry, led by Lord Swann, was launched in response to a number of campaigns against racism in education. In particular, the high-profile scandal of educationally subnormal, or ESN, schools that disproportionately removed higher numbers of Black Caribbean children from mainstream education settings and wrongly labelled them educationally subnormal. A mixture of education policy and racist attitudes was responsible for this shocking discrimination. The 1960s was a time of rising immigration, with the post-war British Empire's invitation to the Windrush generation of workers from the Caribbean and its other colonies to rebuild Britain. It was also a time of significant racist backlash, with the overt racism of Enoch Powell and the notions of racial superiority that gained traction in the political mainstream. These ideas worked their way into our national education policy with the aim of creating and maintaining a two-tier labour force and a deliberately under-educated Black population to fill all the menial jobs that white Brits did not want. This significant miscarriage of justice took place in the 1960s and the 1970s and saw hundreds of Black, mostly Caribbean children wrongly sent to schools that were meant for pupils with severe physical and mental disabilities. These schools had existed since the 1940s due to the 1944 Education Act, provision of appropriate schools for pupils with severe mental or physical disabilities. But by the late 60s, almost 30% of pupils in ESM schools in London were Black immigrant children, compared to 15% in mainstream schools. It was clear that decisions were being made by teachers, educational psychologists and local educational authorities to place these children in ESN schools for reasons other than for mental or physical disabilities. And while parents were aware that their children were being forced to struggle against a racist system, most were isolated and not given the information they needed to make informed decisions regarding their child's education. And it wasn't until an Inner London Education Authority report was leaked that revealed the true extent of this shocking discrimination. Grenadian educator Vernon Cord took the initiative to write and publish the groundbreaking pamphlet, How the West Indian Child is Made Educationally Subnormal in the British School System, making the leaked ILEA information accessible to parents and communities. Mass community mobilisation as a result of Cord's pamphlet inspired parents and community organisations to campaign against the now undeniable institutional racism in British schools that forced the government to respond, and these schools were eventually shut down in the early 1980s. Published in March 1985, Swann's report confirmed Cord's analysis that the persistence of racist stereotypes, biased IQ test, a deep misunderstanding of culture and language, biases in teacher expectations, disciplinary practices and curriculum content were creating significant barriers to education for Black children. It challenged the racist myths that Black children were less intelligent than their white counterparts, and recognised instead that the structural racism embedded in the British education system was disadvantaging them. inadequate support for pupils with English as a second language, a lack of diversity in the curriculum, and significant discontent between schools and parents from ethnic minority backgrounds were identified as further barriers to black children achieving their full academic potential. I'll give way.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I commend the Honourable Lady for Liverpool Riverside for bringing this forward? I spoke to her beforehand and asked the Honourable Lady permission to intervene, because I did check up in the Swann Report, and the Honourable Lady is outlining a very, very clear case of what it did. Does the Honourable Member not agree that the strides that have been taken since that eye-opening report are substantial, and yet the learning curve that we all wish to see for integration and understanding is something which must always continue as we strive to ensure that each of us can claim the best of British education, incorporating our own ethnic background and the rich cultural history and heritage that we all have? Things are better, but there's still a lot more to do.
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention. However, we'll see later on in my speech, while he thinks things have improved, I would say that things haven't substantially improved for lots of black children in our education system. But the report produced several key recommendations, including diversifying and decolonising the curriculum, more diversity in teacher recruitment, anti-racism training for teachers, more resources for language support, better data collection and monitoring, and a better approach to working with parents and communities to build trust and encourage active participation in pupils' education. Predictably, the Thatcher government did little to progress these recommendations. However, the next Labour government took some of the lessons learned as a framework for our Race Relations Amendment Act 2000, and in particular, the introduction of the duty for public institutions, including schools, to promote racial equality. However, we know that many racist barriers still exist in education, from disparities in educational attainment to the school to prison pipeline, the adultification of black pupils, the presence of police in schools, and the need for a truly anti-racist curriculum. Today's patterns of racism, segregation and exclusion in education have evolved directly from the policies and attitudes that drove the ESN scandal. The closure of ESN schools in the 1980s directly led to a rapid expansion in the use of school exclusions, and we began to see higher numbers incarcerated in prisons, the expansion of the use of sets and tiering in education, whereby certain groups of children, increasing numbers, are being denied the opportunity to sit exams at certain levels and then denied the opportunity to progress in educational settings, including going to university. The establishment of pupil referral units is recognised as another method of systematic exclusion from education. The use of PRUs and exclusions are a symptom of failure of the education system. Disruptive behaviour of a child is a cry for help, not a crime. An education system that does not respond with care and support is an education system that is broken. The number of exclusions have soared in recent years, with children as young as 5 being kicked out of school, draconian behavioural policies impacting disproportionately poor children, those living in care and those from Black, Caribbean, mixed and Gypsy, Roma and traveller backgrounds. Swann's recommendations for an inclusive education system are more important today, and we must take this opportunity to update those lessons learned and apply them to our current system. The societal impact is still relevant today as it was in the 1960s and 70s. Lessons must be learnt on the 40th anniversary of the Swann Report to put an end to this systemic discrimination. Evidence of the scale of this injustice of children forced needlessly into ESN schools in the 60s and 70s is scarce, but we do know the impact that misclassification as educationally subnormal has had on survivors, and some of them are joining us today in the gallery, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank them for all their work in exposing this scandal and campaigning to raise awareness of the racial injustice that they suffered. Their work has already made a huge difference. And they have my commitment to keep fighting for the justice and dignity that they deserve. We heard some of these survivors at the event I held yesterday in Parliament, from Noel Gordon, who told us that he was wrongly misclassified as educationally subnormal after a chain of events started with him being diagnosed at age 4 with sickle cell. He described being bullied and abused by teachers, running away from school, and his mum fighting tooth and nail to get him out, but to no avail. And due to his determination, he has achieved several qualifications, including a degree. We heard from Maisie Barrett, who is a natural creative, but described how she needed support with her academic skills and her stutter. But these resources were and are still systematically denied to black children. She has said that her grandchild is a victim of today's SEND system, just like she was a victim of ESN. She told us that if she had received a proper education, she might have pursued her dreams and migrated to Jamaica and fought for recognition for being wrongly classified as educationally subnormal. From Renee Stevens, who was expelled from his mainstream secondary school after his teacher assaulted him and was sent to an ESN school, which neglected his academic development and left school with no qualifications. And deprived of an education and support, he has now spent 18 years in and out of the criminal justice system due to his misclassification and forced to abandon his dream of becoming head chef at the Savoy Hotel. And he says he continues to struggle with societal participation as a direct consequence of being denied proper secondary education. From Denise Davidson, who described how, even in her innocence as a young girl, she realised that her school was different to other schools. She remembers challenging her educational psychologist and how her experience now help her as a children's social worker to support vulnerable children in similar positions. And this is not only an historic justice, it is living one for all who went through it. Most left school at 16 or earlier, unable to read, write or count, and were denied the opportunity to thrive and achieve their full potential. The survivors of ESN still have significant feelings of self-worth, problems accessing meaningful, well-paid work after they were denied an education. I'll give way.
Thank the member for giving way and thank her for the excellent speech she's making and the brilliant event that was organised last night. And would she recognise that many brave black parents in the late 1960s and even earlier than that recognised the abominable way they were being treated, and people like Bernard Cord, who led the campaign against the banding policy in Haringey, in which at that time black children were unfairly treated and classified in the way that she's described, and we should pay tribute to the very brave work and the abuse that those families suffered because they stood up for their rights. And so her debate today and the meeting she had last night is, I think, a testament to the efforts that they put in all those years ago.
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention and totally agree in terms of the amazing work that Bernard Cord and all those families were involved in to try and seek justice and to enable their children to fulfil their full potential, and that needs to be recognised. Problems accessing meaningful, well-paid work were denied. The financial hardship they continue to face because of barriers to work without an education and the impact this has had on their families. A few have succeeded in the face of adversity, gaining qualifications and better jobs, but this is a testimony to their strength and their determination, but they should never have had to struggle in this way. I'd like to take this opportunity to recognise all those whose campaigning helped to get us here today, as well as the incredible campaigners who were misclassified as ESN and who are fighting for justice. My thanks go to Bernard Cord, who pioneered this campaign, the educator and anti-racist campaigner Gus John, for a lifetime of work challenging racism in the British education system, and to all those parents and communities who organised and fought for the change for our children to receive fair and equal treatment, to thrive and achieve their full potential. The incredible No More Exclusions group for their invaluable work shining a light on the injustices of the current system of exclusions and challenging the racist policies and educational segregation that drive the school to prison pipeline. I also want to recognise the work of Francis Swain and Lee Day solicitors in their pursuit of justice for the survivors, and to Professor Leslie Thomas Casey, Dr Cynthia Pinto and Professor Christine Callender for their pioneering work in this area, as well as the incredible work of journalists and producers Latanya Shannon and Sir Steve McQueen for exposing this scandal with the BBC documentary Subnormal, a British Scandal, and the incredible Small Act series. We have seen how the Bates versus the Post Office and Jimmy McGovern's Common, just how crucial TV and film can be in bringing miscarriage of justice to light. And I hope the same will prove to be true here, and that the momentum from this campaign and these dramas will secure justice for those impacted and change a system still producing the same racist outcomes today. And I hope the Minister will join me today in recognising the wrong that was done to the survivors of ESN. A public inquiry into the scandal of these ESN schools is necessary, not only to secure justice for the victims of these historic discriminatory policies, but also for us to understand how systemic racism and discrimination takes form in our current education system and how we can eradicate it. The survivors and the campaigners are calling on the government to give due consideration to a public inquiry. And 4 decades on from the first public report into racism in education, to learn the lessons of the past and secure justice for all whose lives were impacted and continue to suffer. Thank you.
I call Minister Catherine McKinnell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I congratulate the Honourable Member for Liverpool Riverside on securing this important debate, and indeed timely, on this 40th anniversary of the Swann Report. And the report is a really important and stark reminder of the unacceptable treatment of young people, the majority of whom were from the Caribbean, who were inappropriately placed in so-called educationally subnormal schools during the 1960s and 1970s. The Honourable Lady spoke passionately, sharing the experiences of Noel, Maisie, Renee and Denise, ensuring that their voices are heard. The report also serves as a timely reminder to us all of the mistakes that were made, that must never be repeated, and that we must never be complacent. No children or young people today should suffer from the structural barriers and entrenched racism that held back many in previous generations, and that legacy prevails today. Let it be clear that there is no place for hate or prejudice in our education system, and this government is determined to root out structural inequality as well as direct discrimination to create a genuinely level playing field. We cannot reflect on the Swann Report without acknowledging the history of so-called educationally subnormal schools. We owe it to the campaigners who exposed this and refused to accept that these children were somehow less capable, but rather the victims of racism. People, as the Honourable Lady mentioned, like Bernard Cord, and more recently in this period, it has quite rightly received renewed attention through the work of the filmmaker Sir Steve McQueen, whose documentary, Subnormal, a British Scandal, shed light on the impact of these policies. It's also sparked important conversations about the ongoing challenges faced by black and ethnic minority students in our education system. Britain has made strides in tackling overt racial discrimination over the past half-century, but despite progress, there is no room for complacency or indeed self-congratulation. And that is why this government wants to ensure that whoever you are, wherever you come from, Britain is a country that will respect your contribution and will give you a fair chance to get on in life. And that is why we have our opportunity mission, which is to build opportunity for all by setting every child up for the best start in life, helping them to achieve and thrive at school, building skills and opportunity and growth, and building family security too. Our work on the Opportunity Mission will focus cross-government attention and collaboration on ensuring every child and young person truly believes that success belongs to them. And we are more committed to tackling the disparities in educational outcomes that persist than ever. The picture of education achievement across ethnic groups is complex, and different social, economic and cultural factors contribute to this. Parental income levels, parental career and educational achievement, geography, family structure, and attitudes towards education within the family and wider community. And while overall the outcomes of some ethnic groups now compare positively with national average outcomes, for some groups, outcomes are significantly below average or worse than other groups throughout the education system, and that includes Black Caribbean children. But one of the most significant factors affecting pupil attainment, which cuts across all ethnicities, is economic disadvantage. International studies show attainment has broadly improved or remained stable over the last 30 years. However, we know disadvantaged pupils persistently perform significantly worse on average than their peers at all stages of their education, and there's considerable variation in attainment by region and ethnicity. It's just not acceptable, and it's why this government's Opportunity Mission will break down barriers and that unfair link between background and success. We're determined to help all children achieve and thrive. High and rising standards are at the heart of this mission and are key to unlocking stronger outcomes. And we'll deliver these improvements through excellent teaching and leadership, a high-quality curriculum that seeks to deliver a rich and broad and inclusive and innovative curriculum that readies young people for life and for work, that reflects the issues and the diversities of our society, ensuring all children and young people are represented. New RISE teams and a system which removes the barriers to learning that hold far too many children back. The Department for Education acknowledges that some groups of children have a greater likelihood of exclusion than others, and though local context means that there are different patterns across the country, we are determined to get to grips with the causes of exclusions to ensure that every child, no matter their background, can succeed. And that's why we've already committed to providing access to specialist mental health professionals in every school. We want to see earlier intervention in mainstream schools for all pupils, but particularly those at risk of exclusion. And we're absolutely committed to improving inclusivity and expertise in mainstream schools and strengthening accountability by reforming Ofsted to enhance the inspection regime by replacing that single headline grade with a new report card system telling parents how schools are performing and introducing a new annual review of safeguarding, attendance and pupil movement, including off-rolling. I will give way.
Very briefly, I apologise. One of the lessons that's been learnt through the work that people have done with regard to the ESN scandal is the role of unconscious bias. And what we're hearing from parents and from experts and teachers and others and education psychologists is that unconscious bias is the same cause of the exclusions themselves. So there's a need, one of the reasons for people calling for an inquiry is to look at the lessons from that can be taken on board by Ofsted and other agencies in how we support and then address individual schools at the moment in their practices.
The honourable gentleman raises an important point, and I think we have learnt a lot in the last 40 years about unconscious bias and its impact. And I will come on to the specific point that he raises about the public inquiry and also developments that we've seen over the years that have put the protections in place that we need to work to enforce. I wanted, first of all, though, to touch on the challenges in the special educational needs and disability system today, because we do have a clear commitment to addressing these, and we're prioritising early intervention and inclusive provision in mainstream settings, because we know that early intervention is what will prevent unmet needs from escalating. It will support all children and young people to achieve their goals. It will prevent the gap in achievement from growing and really get that support to children at the very earliest stage so that the issues don't escalate in the future. But underpinning our ambition to create a fairer society is the Equality Act 2010, which enshrines in law that schools must not discriminate against a pupil in a number of respects because of their protected characteristics. Specifically, Part 6, Chapter 1, prohibits schools from discriminating, harassing or victimising pupils in areas such as education, access to benefits, facilities, services, exclusion and other detriments, ensuring the fair treatment for all pupils. Additionally, the public sector equality duty requires schools to eliminate discrimination, advance equality of opportunity and foster good relations among all characteristics. This is what will underpin the improvements that we need to see.
Thank you for giving way. And I thank my honourable friend for Liverpool Riverside for the debate. She has made some important points. I think there'll be voices of people affected 40 years ago who haven't been heard and have never been heard. Does the Minister agree that the poverty and deprivation is talking about the challenges that brings in educational standards, also often presents challenges in terms of having your voice heard where there are problems? And talking to the Equality Act, does she agree with me that one of the things we must make sure in terms of making a system fairer is that voices can be heard where there are problems so people can speak out and know that they're heard?
The Honourable Gentleman raises a really important point, and I mean that's one of the reasons why we are so focused on early intervention, particularly where children have experienced a more socio-economic disadvantaged start to life, to help children find their voice so that they can speak up and can be part of the national conversation, which we want for every child in our education system. I'm conscious of time, and I wanted to address the specific point that the Honourable Lady raises of the public inquiry. And the Government doesn't currently plan to establish a public inquiry into the policy framework surrounding the placement of children in schools for the so-called educationally subnormal in the 1960s and 70s. The 40th anniversary of the Swann Report, it really is a timely reminder to reflect on that progress that has been made, but also to ensure that mistakes made at that time must never be repeated, to remind us that there are always ways in which we must go further to ensure that no children or young people today suffer from the structural barriers and entrenched racism that held too many of our young people back in previous generations. And I want to reassure that we are not complacent. We are committed to delivering a fairer society with better opportunities for all. We firmly believe that every child should know that success belongs to them, and that is why we must break down the barriers to opportunity. We're committed to changing the school system so that every child can achieve and thrive. And I look forward to continuing to work with the Honourable Lady. I will give way. I think I have maybe a few seconds.
I just wanted to ask Honourable Friend whether you could provide some rationale in terms of why the Government is not deciding to go down the route for a public inquiry.
So I think we're out of time, but I know the Honourable Lady, we are supposed to meet next week, so we can discuss this in more detail. Well, we'll have more time, but I do look forward to continuing to work with the Honourable Lady to redress race disparities and to work on these issues that I know she's incredibly passionate about, and rightly so.
The question is that this House to now adjourn. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. The ayes have it, the ayes have it. Order. Order.